Hello my dear sewing friends. Today we have a wildly requested sewing tutorial and we're going to talk about how to insert a perfect knit neckband. I will share with you exactly step by step what I do and oddly enough things that I don't do and a few extra tips along the way to help you out as well because I know it can be tricky at times. So without any further ado, let's jump right into it. First, I need to tell you that fabric is the boss, and probably more than half of the times that a neckline on the knit garment didn't come out and you're blaming yourself, it's probably not you. It's probably the fabric, but most importantly, the ratio of the length between the actual neckband and your finished garment. Now, fabric is the boss, and I tell you that all the time because it is about 50% of success of your garment. You have to choose the right fabric for the right garment that you have in mind to sew. Now, here is exactly the same, but with the ratio of the length. Now, I have a really good rule of thumb that I use in about 90% of the cases, and the rest of the 10% of the cases, you really have to experiment a little bit. Not a whole lot, just a little bit, but that's how it goes with everything in sewing. So the rule of thumb is for me, if I'm using just a very standard lycra jersey rayon knit, then I cut the length of my neckband 80% of the length of the actual neckline of my finished garment, right? So your neckband is going to be shorter because you will be stretching it out as you sew it in place. You want to make sure that this part right over here really hugs the curve, right? Now, for anything that is rib knit and stretches really nicely, I use about, I would say 75%, sometimes 70, just really depending on how stretchy is that rib knit. And then for cotton knits that really don't have any additions to them, it's 100% cotton knit. It kind of stretches, but it really takes you a little while to stretch it out. I usually cut them at about 90% because otherwise you will have huge ripples right over here on the garment and on the neckline itself as well. Now that you have your neckband cut to the appropriate length, go ahead and place it right sides together on the short ends of the neckband and sew it. Next is a step that you will see in quite a few instructional videos and in quite a few tutorials, and I'm not saying it's wrong, but I never do it. Or I shouldn't say never, never say never. I should say I barely ever do it, and there's a reason for it. So I don't press the neckband in half. And the reason for it is because a lot of times when you press knits, especially combination knits, it will create a crease right over here that you can't get rid of after, and it really flattens the neckband all the way. But I do like a little puffy neckband, a little roll of the neckband right over here, just like you would see in ready-to-wear garments. That is a personal preference. If you are a beginner, it is easier if you press your neckband. However, I don't think it's so much easier. So if you like the little roll on the neckband, don't press it. If you really don't care, you just want to insert a really perfect neckband, do press it. It might make it a tad easier for you to work with it. Next, we need to find center back and center front of both the neckband and the neckline of your finished garment. Now, on the neckband, it's really easy to do because your center back is going to be the seam that we just did to complete the neckband in the round, and the center front is going to be right on the opposite direction off of it, right? So center back and center front, same goes for your garment, center back and center front. Now, in a lot of tutorials, they will tell you to find quarter ways, center back, center front, and then quarter and quarter here. And I don't do it. You can, if it will make it easier for you. Again, practice makes perfect, and you have to find a way that works for you. I always, and you see that in my tutorials time and time again, I only do center back and center front. And the reason for it is because when I just started sewing, I used to do it religiously, center back, center front, and quarter measurements. And I would try to insert it, and it just would not come out. As soon as I removed the quarter measurements out of it and I just did center front and center back, everything fell in place and my neckbands became perfect. So it really depends what works for you. I'm presenting you the steps that I do to achieve the look that you see right over here. So mark the center front, center back, and let's baste them together. This next step is probably the key to having a really beautiful neckline and a neckband, especially if you're a beginner or you're struggling with inserting neckbands. And after a while, maybe after a month or 2 months of you doing a couple of projects like that, you probably won't need to do that at all. But basting really saves the day. What you want to do is you want to take your neckband and your garment and you want to align those notches or those pin needles that we inserted at the center front and center back. So you want to align them and you want to pin them in place. Now you can visually tell that the neckband, of course, is shorter or smaller than the actual neckline of the garment. And that's exactly what we want. We want to stretch it as we sew it so that way it creates those beautiful curves. Now what I want you to do is I want you to stretch it a little bit and either take a hand sewing needle or do that on a sewing machine with the longest straight stitch available, okay? And you want to baste it in place, lightly stretching it out to really make sure that you understand how it's going to lay flat. After that, if you want to try it out, you can, to make sure that it really lays flat as you want it. If you feel that, it has a little dip right over here and it kind of dips like this, okay, then you remove your basting stitches, you shorten your back seam of your neckline by maybe 1/4 of an inch or 1/8 of an inch, and you do a new seam and then you insert it again. And you double test it again. You want to make sure that it lays nice and flat, and 1/4 of an inch is enough, or 1/8 of an inch is enough to remove. Sometimes just a tiny little detail can make a big difference in how our garment looks and performs. Another quick tip for those of you who are sewing with a serger: if you constantly feel that the point where your neckband, your center back of your neckband is meeting the center back of your garment, and where one serger seam is meeting the end of the other serger seam, always is a little bulky, a little bit too thick, a little ugly looking, and it's never as neat as you want it, the tip is to start at the shoulder seam. So to eliminate that bulk at the center back of your garment, start at the shoulder seam. Why not? You will see that sometimes in ready-to-wear garments that they will start not the center back of the neckband, but you will start stitching at the shoulder, and then you will complete your stitching at the shoulder as well. Alright, so now that your neckband is in place and stitched, you just need to secure the thread and press the neckline, but only where the seam is at of the neckband and the neckline. As I said, I don't press the whole neckband because then it really flattens it, but if you don't mind, go ahead and do that. If you do, then just with the tip of your iron right over here. And when it comes to pressing, don't forget that the seam where the neckband and your garment meets needs to be facing down, away from the neckband when you're pressing. Now here's the biggest tip of them all that I can give you that I think is the most valuable, is that practice makes perfect. Make a tiny little neckline like this, make a tiny little neckband like this, and practice, practice, practice. It doesn't have to be a full-blown garment that you are, sewing. It can be a little practice one, maybe like a baby size or a little bit bigger, and it doesn't have to be a full t-shirt, just the part of the actual neckline, the top part of the t-shirt. So practice makes perfect. Go ahead and try to make some beautiful neckbands. I know you can do it. I'll see you next time, guys. Bye. Happy sewing.